evening, everyone. I'm going to walk around a little because I'm a big fan of Shamika, and following a panel after she has spoken is going to be really hard. So I'm going to walk around a little to get you all a little bit interested in our panel. I will introduce our speakers in a minute. And since I've already been introduced, I won't go into myself. But this panel is very important to me, and I'm going to assume it is very important to everybody sitting here. This panel is about the trade-offs between development, the things that we would like to have, and the environment, the things that we need to have, right? Is a trade-off necessary, or can we find a balance? And given that there's so many young people in this audience, I would assume a balance is in your best interest, right? Shamika talked a lot about evidence-based policymaking. She also talked a lot about the importance of looking at it from the very micro perspective. She also then talked about the importance of understanding what it is that we need to do for India to reach that stage of, and she said, be developed by 2047. And what is it realistically that India can do? But is it the job of India to do it as a whole? Or is it a job of all of us to do it both at the city level, at the urban level, and then at the state level? And to talk about these things, which for me, as somebody who lives in Mumbai right now, but I've lived in several cities across India. I've also lived in several cities across the world, including incredibly crowded places like Cairo and Istanbul. So Mumbai is trafficked and crowded, but it's not so different from others around the world. But then you come to a place like Pune, which used to be very different. I've been coming to Pune for almost 30 plus years. And it's very different now, the Pune that I see. And then I travel to parts of India that have seen very little development, but are likely to be extremely developed in the next few years. Shamika mentioned about, and all of you I think were already here when Shamika was giving her speech, she mentioned how our cities are some of the fastest developing in the world. 17 Indian cities are in the fastest developing of the 25 fastest in the world. Our urban population right now, and urbanization is not just what we see in a tier 2 or tier 3 city, but urbanization is 65% population right now. By the end of this decade, it's likely to be 75%. That's a very conservative estimate. How do we achieve all of this by also having that green space that we would like to have, that clean air that we all really want to have but don't necessarily have right now, that clean water, the parks for our children to play in, or for all of us to be able to enjoy at whatever stage in life that we are in, and a life that is, it's nice, it's comfortable, but it's also modern. It is comfortable in many different ways, right? And so we have an excellent panel over here. I'm going to sit down now because it's their turn to talk now. I'm going to ask some very hard questions because we have from here, from Pune and Mumbai with us, two commissioners from the municipal commissioning bodies of these two cities, Ashwini Bhide and Shekhar Singh. We also have with us Shardul Fadnavis, who works with PwC, but represents, I will say, for this particular panel, all the money that goes behind building everything that's in our wonderful cities and our country. And Bandu Dhotre, who I think is very famous for many things, but I will say probably the most famous for bringing to light some of these issues that we would all like to do something about, but we're not really sure how. And he has translated that, what we want to do, into how we do it. So I'm also very cognizant of the time. I know we are running over, but secretly behind this hall, I have been given 10 minutes extra, which I will use to take audience questions. I have a lot of questions, but I'm sure you have a lot of questions as well. And so, what I'm going to do is go through one round of questions to all of you, perhaps probe a little bit if you give me a safe answer. I know almost all of you. Banduji, I'm meeting for the first time, but I've read a lot, so I feel like I know you already. And then the rest of you I know. If you give me a very safe answer, I am going to ask a harder question, right? We have a lot of young people here. They all want to live really good lives, right? So is it a trade-off between our urban development and our environment, or is that sustainable balance possible, right? It's a very simple question. And to answer that very simple question, I'm going to come to the two of you first, very obviously. But in answering that question, I would really like both of you to think about the fact that, admittedly, yes, if we consider all the statistics that Shamika put up, we have rising unemployment in some places. It's down in some places. We do have a youth that is increasing in numbers. It is our demographic dividend, if we would like it to be. Obviously, everybody needs a job. Everybody needs transportation. We want those facilities. This morning, I took the Trans Harbour link to come from Mumbai to Pune. It cut down my journey by an hour. I was like, this is amazing. Not only is it cutting down my journey time-wise, it's also consuming less petrol, right? So that's the kind of trade-off we're looking at. But in developing too fast and in developing perhaps in the way that's not long-term sustainable from an environment perspective, and so then from a health, water, climate perspective, are we making mistakes that we shouldn't be making? And so, Ashwini ji, I'm going to put the spotlight on you first, seeing as how you in some ways represent one of the biggest cities and the fastest growing cities in this country, definitely in this world, but also a city that is facing some of the worst effects of climate change and are likely to see more of that going forward.
Yeah, good evening. I think both sustainable development and environment safety or protection is possible. That's what my the immediate answer to your question. But there are certain caveats, there are certain challenges in it, and they need to be addressed. As Shamika ji said, urbanization, rapid urbanization is a fact we all need to accept, and we cannot wish it away. And if so much of population is coming to cities, if the cities are growing so fast, we need to give them basic amenities, and two basic amenities are, of course, transportation and housing, and the rest would come along it. And unless these two problems are solved, all other facets of livability of a city cannot be achieved. And that is why we need to achieve this in a very short time window. I know that urgency creates a lot of other issues, but doing things urgently doesn't mean doing them hastily. So the challenge is basically to, you want me to reply only that, or I can?
No,
continue?
I think if you're going to raise the challenge here, perhaps it would also be useful then to give an example as to how we can address that challenge.
Yeah. So I would say in this, I will mention 2-3 challenges. The first challenge, of course, the rigor, how to address the rigor of doing all these things, because we can't do things hastily. Whenever big projects are required to be done, and they are needed, that nobody can deny it, but if you have to address the problems because of the urgency in doing this, then we have to do it with lot of rigor, with discipline, with meticulousness, and that is what sometimes gets missed while doing things in a hurry. And we have a robust regulatory mechanism which actually warrants that we look at all these rigor and meticulousness, but when big projects are done, that is followed also very meticulously, but there are a number of projects which miss on those things, and the sheer number of these projects creates additional burden on environment, on sustainability, on livability. So I think that is the first issue which needs to be addressed. And a project like Mumbai Metro 3 or even Coastal Road, lot of this rigorous discipline is followed. But then the second challenge comes when there is an information deficit, there is a trust deficit, there is a communication problem. And that communication problem creates a lot of tension, lot of conflicts. And because people don't know, and that question of narrative also comes, which was discussed earlier, and because people don't know what exactly is happening and it is not properly communicated, there are protests, there are deflection of reality, and because of which the projects get stuck, and that is why it puts additional burden on the city. Third issue is the long term, the balance between the long term and short term gains. At times, to achieve some long term gains, there are some short term costs which we have to pay, but we exaggerate them. Sometimes the projects which are meant for long term gains, and if in short term we don't see those gains, then they are criticized. And because of this, we have more of an emotive response to most of the things rather than a rational or evidence based response, and that creates a lot of confusion. And because of which, even though we can very well achieve the balance between development works and environmental safety or environmental issues, we at times we don't find them in reality. And the best example is, of course, Mumbai Metro Line 3, where all the best practices, all the rigor, all the discipline, all kinds of studies, everything was very meticulously followed. But nevertheless, the narrative basically surrounded with some issues, because of which there were multiple litigations, the project got delayed, and ultimately the most environmentally sustainable project had to face a lot of problems. So I think these are the challenges in implementing these projects, and they need to be addressed, they need to be discussed. If that is done, then we don't need to have this trade-off.
Ashwini, we have known each other a while now, and I think you will take this as not Ambika, your friend, but Ambika, the moderator. Since you talked about the metro and opened that door, I'm sure there might be a question about, I'm assuming some of those challenges that you mentioned were pertaining to the car shed and RA. For many of us who live in Mumbai, that was a big concern. Now, was that a result of bad PR and bad narrative, or was that actually a true story? I think that is something might be interesting if you wanted to address that. I'm just going to say, yeah, we'll come back to that. Also, if anyone has a question about that, I'm happy to take that. But same question to you, right? Pune is very different from Mumbai, but the rate of development that we are seeing in Pune, it's likely to be this mega city very soon. Is Pune learning from some of the mistakes of other Indian mega cities? And are you doing better then? Or are we walking down that same path where there is likely to be a whole lot of development, but not enough of the other sustainable side of it? Pune used to be a city of a lot more green spaces. You see a lot less of that now. The waters are a little bit more polluted. So where are you situating Pune in this entire question?
So I think just one disclaimer before I answer. I would like to answer more for Pimpri-Chinchwad than Pune, but then we take it as a whole. We take it as a whole area, but would not want to really represent Pune as such. Ambika, the only thing that I would like to say is, when you see Indian cities growing, right, and you see PCMC is growing at a very fast rate, the outskirts of Pune are growing at a very fast rate, and Pune is like a magnet for all people coming from various places in Maharashtra and otherwise also. If you look at all these people who are now coming, we were talking about labor force participation. These are the people who are now entering the economy. And these are the people, if you look at far-flung areas in, say, PCMC or maybe somewhere in Pune as well, I think those are the people who are little late to the party, so to say, that, they are probably now coming in, now getting employment, etc., etc. If you look at that trade-off, yes, there is a trade-off. We are beginning to learn, as you said, probably from other cities, probably from international experience, etc. But for some time, that trade-off is going to be there for such a large population which are coming to our cities. PCMC has grown from 17 lakh to now 30 to 31 lakh in simply a matter of 10 years. When you start comparing it with the kind of provisioning that you need to do for water, that you need to do for waste management, that you need to do for so many other things, probably there should come a time where we should stop the building permissions and the development permissions, because I'm not saying about Pune region as such, but in many cities there's no water available. Now there are a number of examples throughout the India or throughout otherwise world as well. But when you look at the trade-offs, these things become very important. So now, for people living in Delhi 01, Mumbai 01 or Pune 01, they've been here since centuries, right? But for people who are now at the edges, do you stop that or do you keep going there? And that's also a classic debate that I feel our country is also going through when you compare to the development paradigm that the Western world is currently and we are there today. And there's a lot of lecturing which goes on from the Western world towards what India is. But we have been very, very firm in saying that there are certain development imperatives that we need to fulfill. That is as true for India as it is true for any city which is there. Whether we've started to learn, yes, we've started to learn. Very quick, simple examples. And that is also a debate, once we start debating in these, we're sitting in Gokhale Institute in an auditorium. Most of the people sitting here are opinion makers of the society. And so to say, if I simply ask how many cycled today to this place, I have one hand. How many walked to this place? You might be some, or a lot of them. So that means you are living in Pune 01, right? But for most of the people who we talk about, including me, for example, now we are, for example, as a city, as PCMC, we are going for a lot of these walking pathways. We are going for a lot of cycle tracks and all those things. And PCMC has taken a lot of pride in trying to do that for the past 5-6 years now, and we are doing it quite well. The only point that I'm trying to make it brings it into a conflict into the people driving in their cars who say that you are reducing a road size while you are increasing the size of the pathways or a cycle track, versus a person who was naturally walking because A, he does not have the means, or he is walking probably because for leisure, for health, etc. The only point that I'm trying to make is that when we talk about climate change or sustainability issues, we're talking about a generational equity. But we also need to start thinking about an equity within the social class, the equity within our economic strata, and the equity between what is the core of the city and what is the edges of the city, and that becomes something which is very, very important.
Excellent. I like this point about the generational equity, and I completely agree. Right? We cannot say to anyone moving to a city, sorry, there's no place because I don't want to build one more housing complex. Right? That is not how India will develop at any rate. But where we put that housing complex, where we decide to build that additional industrial park, that is what matters beyond a point, right? You cannot just dump it anywhere. You have to bring in that environment lens then. And that is where then that trade-off becomes an equitable balance. And if you're saying that PMC is doing that, then I would say that's great. I do not know so much about Pimpri Chimtwad's development, but I will look it up for sure. I'm going to come back to the two of you on this very question of generational equity. But before that, I wanted to come to Banduji to see if he would like to comment on what the two of them have said from the perspective of the work that you have been engaged in. I mean, we understand the constraints that they might have working in the jobs that they do. They are looking at growth. They are looking at development of their cities. They're trying to do it in, I would assume, the best way possible. And I know the work that the both of them do. So I can say that it is probably in the best way given all of these challenges. But given all the work you do in environment and activism, do you see that? Or does that messaging have to change a little bit as well? मेरा सवाल था कि जो इन्होंने बोला सिटीज़ अर्बन डेवलपमेंट के बारे में कि लोग आ रहे हैं, देश बढ़ रहा है, हमको हाउसिंग भी देना है, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन भी देना है, जॉब्स भी देना है, काम भी देना है, बट पानी का देखना है, पार्क्स का भी देखना है, स्कूल का भी देखना है, हेल्थ का भी देखना है. अभी जो ये दोनों कर रहे हैं और उनके ऑफिसेस जो कर रहे हैं, वो बोल रहे हैं कि अभी हम सही तरीके से करने के लिए कोशिश कर रहे हैं, बट बहुत सारे चैलेंजेस हैं. जो काम आप एंगेज हैं, आपकी तरफ से कैसे लग रहा है? आई थिंक हाँ, दैट वाज माय क्वेश्चन.
जो भी शहर अभी विकसनशील स्थिति में है या ग्रो कर रहे हैं, ये सभी जगह पे ये प्रॉब्लम्स है। लेकिन कहीं पे हमारा जो समन्वय है, जो स्टेक होल्डर्स होते हैं, जो पॉलिसीज डिज़ाइन होती है अपने शहर के लिए, होता यूँ है कि जो लोग अपोज करने के लिए आते हैं एनवायरमेंटल कंसर्न लेके, तो उनके साथ कोई संवाद होता नहीं है पहले। तो एक समन्वय न होने की वजह से बहुत सारे प्रॉब्लम्स हो जाते हैं। आप एक उदाहरण के तौर पर समझ सकते हैं, क्योंकि मैं जिस तरीके से काम कर रहा हूँ ब्यूरोक्रेट्स के साथ, एक समन्वय के तौर पर कर रहा हूँ, तो ज़्यादा कन्फ्लिक्ट नहीं हो रहा। लेकिन एक उदाहरण के तौर पर हम समझ सकते हैं कि जैसे देखिए, मैं आज यहाँ पूना में आया हूँ, मेरा दोस्त यहाँ पे एडवोकेट राजेश है, ये मुझे पहचानते हैं। अब मुझे पुणे नहीं मालूम है, एक रास्ते से मैं गुजर जाता हूँ और किसी और के साथ मेरा व्हीकल टकरा जाता है, तो मुझे नहीं पहचानता है और वो मुझे और मैं उसको नहीं पहचानता हूँ, तो दोनों में झगड़ा हो जाता है, हाथापाई तक आ जाता है। लेकिन मैं राजेश से टकराता हूँ तो मुझे मुस्कुराकर मेरा स्वागत करता है, या झगड़ा हाथापाई नहीं होती है। तो होता यूँ है कि जब भी कोई ऐसे इश्यूज होते हैं ब्यूरोक्रेट्स प्रशासन के साथ और एक एक्टिविस्ट के साथ, तो कोई समन्वय न होने की वजह से होता है। तो किसी भी शहर का जो भी प्लानिंग्स है, तो मैं हमेशा बोलता हूँ हमारे कमिश्नर साहब को वगैरह कि हमारा एक कम से कम 20 ईयर का एक प्लान हो कि आगे चल के हम क्या करने वाला है। होता यूँ है कि कोई भी अफसर नया आता है, उसके बाद नई पॉलिसीज आती है, नया कुछ करना चाहते हैं, तो उस समय पे उन लोगों के साथ कोई टॉक नहीं होता है, कोई कोऑर्डिनेशन नहीं होता है। तो वो चल के जब कन्फ्लिक्ट के रोल में आ जाता है, कोई आंदोलन होता है, अब लोगों को लगता है कि जैसे आरए का इशू हो गया, ये एनवायरमेंटल कंसर्न है, बहुत सारे यूथ है जिनको एनवायरमेंट के बारे में पता है, तो ये सब जुड़ जाते हैं। तो ये बड़ा आंदोलन जब होने लगता है तो पॉलिटिकल इन्वॉल्वमेंट होने लगता है, तो जो बेसिक चीजें हैं जो इनके मन में है, जो एक्टिविस्ट के मन में है, वो बाजू में गिर जाते हैं और बड़ा इश्यूज होता है। तो जो भी है, शहरों के सारे इश्यूज हमें आज पता है, लेकिन आज हमें ये भी पता है जिन चीज़ों के ऊपर सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट, उसके सारे गोल्स के बारे में हमें पता है, पर स्थिति यह है कि लगभग करोड़ों साल की जर्नी में यूनिवर्स के निर्माण के बाद ह्यूमन जैसे मानवीय उत्क्रांति भी हो गई है, लेकिन एक शतक के अंदर हमने अपने पर्यावरण का राज भी किया है। तो जो स्थिति वहाँ के लोकल लोगों को पता रहता है कि ये जरूरी है, ये सारी चीज़ें। जैसे मैं चंद्रपुर से आता हूँ, तो यहाँ पे लगभग 30 साल पहले पावर जनरेशन का CTPS पावर प्लांट लगा हुआ है। उस समय में 90 मीटर की चिमनी हुआ करती थी, आज के मानक से चल नहीं सकती है, फिर भी उसको चलाया जा रहा है। तो ऐसी स्थिति में जिसका पोल्यूशन शहर में, अगर कोई गर्भवती स्त्री चंद्रपुर शहर में रहती है 9 महीने 9 दिन, तो उसके गर्भ में जो बच्चा पैदा होने वाला है, माँ के गर्भ से ही बीमारी लेके पैदा होता है। अगर ये स्थिति है, इस स्थिति के ऊपर हम अगर बात करें, तो हमारा डिमांड है कि ये पुराने जो भी यूनिट है बंद करना चाहिए। तो इसका कोई विरोध ये नहीं होता है। तो उस तरीके का पॉलिसी का जो भी चीज है, लोगों की रिक्वायरमेंट है, उनके जहन में जो भी इश्यूज है, उसको लेकर जो टकराव होता है, लेकिन फिर भी ब्यूरोक्रेट्स को भी यही पता चलता है कि ये सही है, डिमांड से, तो उसके ऊपर सॉल्यूशंस भी मिलते हैं। बट वो टॉक होना काफी जरूरी हो जाता है। मेरे ख्याल से अन्य शहरों में भी मैं देखता हूँ कि वो चर्चाएं होती नहीं है।
Thank you. Yes, yes. I'm before that, and I'm going to come to the two of you, but I'm not going to translate the entire remarks of Banduji. But for anyone who didn't understand, it comes down to a very fundamental difference of: is there a conversation between the supposed beneficiaries of said plan or policy and the people who are coming in to implement that? And is there a fundamental difference between that narrative, right? And he gave a couple of examples, but that is the crux of what he was trying to say. So if the two of you would like to maybe comment, you wanted to go first? Yeah.
I just wanted to make a quick point on what Banduji just said. So I was in Gadchiroli before in one of my assignments. And this was a very common oft refrain that the pollution in Chandrapur is because of CTPS. And yes, that is correct. काही प्रमाणात म्हणजे तो आहे, CTPS कारण आहे. But recently we were discussing this with people from Safar and Professor Rakesh Kumar also. And what Shamika ji was saying about data, the data about Chandrapur says that the majority source apportionment of pollution in Chandrapur is from households burning coal in their house, because coal is very cheap. Chandrapur has mines and there is all sort of coal available throughout, and low quality coal, much more than what the CTPS throws out. So this also points out to what ma'am was saying in terms of how we are able to communicate a particular problem, because everyone thinks CTPS is the reason. Whereas CTPS is not actually the reason. The reason is people burning coal in their home much more than what CTPS is producing. And I could not agree more with what he's saying. I think we all try to coordinate. Ma'am would be doing, I also try to do. But sometimes that coordination doesn't get translated. I'll give a very quick example and probably stop. One is a bit of a landmine for people sitting in Pune. It's about riverfront development. So that's almost like a landmine that I've tripped myself on. But riverfront development is a classic case of why and how, even after coordination, there are certain, narratives which both sides agree to and certain narratives both sides don't agree to. Same is the case with, there's a case about Punavde Kachra Depot in PCMC where people were up in arms against the municipal corporation because I took this decision that I need to develop that MRF because city is 30 lakh and tomorrow it's going to become 40-45 lakh. If I don't develop this particular facility, there's no land available for, processing of the waste going forward. But people thought that no, that's not a good reason because yes, there are trees there. It was a forest land, not totally forested, but there were some trees. But at some point of time, that again brings you that trade-off that I need to manage the waste for the city. Where else do I bring it? No Gram Panchayat is ready to accept our waste because they say you manage it in your city. And if I don't get this land, which is at the edge of the city, 10 years later, there's going to be no land. So currently, we've decided to stall the project. The decision has been taken, but those are the things that in spite of every good coordination, it doesn't work out.
Yes, I can't agree more with what Banduji said, that communication, that's what I was trying to say, that that information deficit, trust deficit or proper lack of communication is an issue. Sometimes the implementing authorities or the administration lacks in that, but at times administration comes forward, communicates, but the other section creates some kind of an impasse. They just refuse to understand what the administration is saying. I'm just giving you 3 examples, very small examples. In Metro 3, we had 2 problems. One was this RA depot issue. Other was the rehabilitation issue of the Girgaon Kalbadevi area, where we were temporarily uprooting the people and then we were to bring them back. There was absolute mistrust. And there is a third example of the coastal road which I am having with the fisherman community. In these other 2 cases, fisherman community and Girgaon Kalbadevi, we were absolutely transparent in all our communication. I myself must have taken 50 to 60 meetings with each small group. My team continued meeting them, and after 2 years of rigorous dialogue with these people, we could convince them that what we are going to do with them is the larger interest of not only theirs but of the city. We'll have 2 stations, they will be temporarily shifted, and that trust is still there. And we are now started building their houses after 5 years, and they are still trusting us because they were open for discussion. And there were a lot of issues, lot of questions in the beginning, but we could answer them. We could change some of our strategies and policies to accommodate their request, and we could do that. Same thing happened with the fishermen community, who were continuously opposing our bridge connecting to Bandra-Worli Sea Link, which is part of the Coastal Road South. They wanted a 200-meter span even for their tiny boats. And we continuously kept on arguing that the spans which we have given, 3 spans of 60 meters are good enough. NIO data shows that, Government of India data shows that. We kept on discussing. We roped in TISS to calculate their compensation. Everything was done. But at some point of time, we realized that beyond the limit, we can't convince them. So we again appointed a committee. And there was an alternative available. So we thought we will come somewhere in between. You are asking for a 200 meter span. We are insisting on 60. So we came in between to a 120 meter span, which option was available at a slightly higher cost. But the project could consume that kind of higher cost. And we did that. And finally, it worked fine. But when it came to the question, the issue of RA, where there was so much of data. Today also you Google that RA colony and you will see on the Google map that how tiny that depot land is. And within that also how we have already protected a large green patch. And if that depot at that location can make, only that location can make this project sustainable for next 150 years. Otherwise, this huge investment is going to go waste. It won't achieve the kind of results it would have, because if we have a depot at 10 kilometers away, for which again the additional cost was there. But there was an impasse, and come what may, all kinds of communication was tried, but there was a narrative. nobody was ready to look at the evidence-based decision making which was done. Why the government was also very, very firm on that, because the data was there, but nobody was ready to accept that. And that is where there was a problem, and the issue was blown out. Now, when you talk about environmental sustainability, we can't reduce that whole large and wider phenomena just to protection of trees. Because environmental sustainability, that balance between the growth of the cities, which is now, there is no other way, I mean, we have to go for that, and environmental sustainability, that can't be achieved only by saving of trees. You have so many other things to do. You have to plan your project. If you take in the case of Metro 3, we started working on it from 2011. All kinds of rigorous reports by experts were made. We did very detailed geotechnical investigation. We did, even though metro projects don't need environment impact assessment because they are considered to be environmentally sustainable because it's a rail-based public transport, and especially Metro Line 3, which has the capacity to carry 17 lakh passengers per day and removal of almost 6.5 lakh vehicles from the road. So it already has an environmental benefit over what is happening in the city today. And if the trains in Mumbai, they can't carry, they are already running it to their seams with carrying 80 lakh passengers per day. So many deaths are happening on the city. Vehicles have increased by 115% in last 10 years. So how will you move people from one place to another? But so just a minute. So I'll just wind up. So the thing is, the entire project was done in a very environmentally sustainable way, but that shortened the narrative only to a small issue. I won't say it's a issue which we should neglect. But if we do that, then probably there is an impasse is created. And what Banduji says, that unless we have some common grounds where we can communicate with each other, that it becomes very difficult to resolve the problem. So I think we all need to be mindful of that so that we can achieve the balance in these two factors.
Thank you, and I'm glad that you brought up the points because. And I asked this question very specifically is because I know the work that these offices have been involved in. I've been part of some of those discussions, and there was a lot of evidence provided from the government side on looking at that cost-benefit analysis of using that small part of RA. I will admit that right in the beginning, I was one of those people that said, how can you cut down, these 35,000 trees? Which was,
it started is only 2,100 and not 35,000.
It started by people saying 35,000, then it said, okay, 30,000, right? So this whole narrative was all over the place. And I was one of those people that said, how can you do this? Went to the meetings, heard the data, heard the evidence, looked at it from a long-term sustainability perspective of what is possible when we also think about where we want to be from a greenhouse gas emissions lens, right? You have to look at that big picture. I am definitely, I wouldn't say converted, but I understand the need for this. And I think that was one of the biggest problems that we have still in Mumbai when it comes to the Metro 3 project, is that lack of both sides wanting to be able to have that conversation. I'm going to come to you now. Last but not least, because you are coming with all
we
the
consultants
money.
are used to that. So,
yes.
Choose your careers wisely, folks.
You work with the government, but there's also the government comes to you not only for analysis, but the government comes to and you, I mean, of course, as your as PwC, but as the larger corporate sector for financing, right? And a lot of what we are talking about rests with that financing. Where would, in the long term, and this is something Ashwini ji mentioned right in the beginning, we have to consider short term versus long term. And if the government or an agency that was saying, you know what, I need to build X, Y, Z, this is my short-term loss in terms of whatever environment cost it might be, but this is my long-term gain. Where would you put your money? Very simply put.
Yeah. So, look, a lot of work that we do, right, is based on secondary research, and we look at what's happening, across the nation and then across the world. And also, a lot of work that we do is reflection of what the policies are out there, right? So, I'll talk a little bit about the kind of projects we are involved in today. So we're doing projects that are related to RE integration, right? We are doing projects which are bringing in technology intervention for reducing AT&C losses and automation of that whole meter to cash cycle so that we optimize also our field force usage, right? Now, we also do a lot of work on the demand side where we're working on smart buildings, efficient buildings. We work with the government on all these energy efficiency programs. So we do this. We are also working with the government and private players in the mining sector, right? Where we are helping them in sustainable, smart mining, right? Where you're actually bringing out coal, which is used to provide energy to us. We're working with government and private players on the oil side, right? And we're doing a lot of work with the oil and gas companies. Now, there's a lot of frowns around the last 2-3 things that I mentioned, right? And the reason I'm talking about all of this is I take pride in all of this that we do, because that's where the balance in the policies is today, right? We're doing work on the energy efficiency side. We're doing work on reducing the losses, bringing in sustainability. Why we need to do this and why we need to do this right is because our country needs energy security, right? Like ma'am said, we're about 90% 90% electrified. We do not have the luxury to say, I will not use coal, especially sitting here talking about it in this room. So the balance is critical with where we are as a country. I think my personal opinion, we need to lean more towards growth than environment for a bit and figure out how the environment is going to come into play in that conversation, right? The other point that I'd like to make, by the way, and perhaps not to your question, but this is the first time I've got the mic in my hand. So the other point, right? See, there's a lot of robust laws that are out there. Okay, I think our environment law, our forest law, our water conservation law are pretty robust, right? But there is no adherence to these laws, and you can't put that on the government, right? It is our responsibility to adhere to what's out there, right? I mean, Shekhar ji spoke about how many walked here. Ola kachara, suka kachara. Kiti loka vega kartat. This is wrong audience, but you get my point, right? but you get my point, right? We don't even do that. I mean, yeah. So my point is, if we just get the basics right, a lot can be addressed.
I agree. Civic involvement. And it's very easy to say that, government is doing this, government is not doing this, when as the average citizen, we're not really doing anything for ourselves either. And in that, I completely agree with you. I think you had some claps on the whole point of we need to grow at the cost of the environment for the time being. Somebody might also say then, where do we put that stop? Otherwise, there might not be any environment to enjoy in the future. We will enjoy it, but the next gen might not. So where do you see that line then?
So we is a very complex we, right? And so that line is somewhere out there. I think there's efforts being made on both sides, right? By the civic society, by folks like Bandu ji, by the government. Look, one thing's very clear. People being poor is not going to help the environment. Our people need to come out of poverty, and that will help the environment. So that's where I sit on this topic.
Excellent.
Yes, right now we have to put more focus on growth, and but we still, that is possible by spending little more on mitigation measures. Today's problem is we are not costing those mitigation measures properly. In big projects like Metro 3 or Coastal Road, there is already a provision for dealing with this. The cost to environment during construction or even post construction, we are taking care of that. In Coastal Road, fishermen will leave some livelihood even later on. We have factored that in and we are paying them. But there are multiple small projects, especially real estate projects, small infrastructure projects, and I think they are damaging environment though temporarily, but the costing for mitigation of that damage, that is not incorporated in the project cost. We want everything at a cheaper price. So I think we have to factor that in. We have to make people adhere to this robust regulatory mechanism by attaching some cost to it and including it in the project cost. Unless that is done, we can't have the actual mitigation measures which are prescribed by this robust regulatory mechanism in implementation.
Yeah, just one follow on, right?
Sorry, I'm just going to pause one second and come to the audience. I'll collect a couple of questions and then perhaps we can come back to
Yeah,
you.
just to
Okay.
finish that thought though, right? Look, from a perspective of, and I've lost it, so I think we can go to the audience.
Maybe in one of the questions it might trigger that. Okay, many hands up there. Do we have some mics for the audience as well? If not, I'm sure we can share up here. Yes, all right. To you here in the middle, since he was...
So the question goes like this. Owing to their role in the various aspects of policy formulation, implementation and monitoring, I feel that the path of urban transformation, which is the topic of today's debate, overlaps heavily with the climate positive transformation of the Indian bureaucracy and the IAS in particular. I want to ask this to the panel that on a scale of 1 to 5, where do you grade the Indian administrative setup on their being climate positive? And are they in the know of any roadmap to improve if they are not really grading themselves great as of now? Thanks.
Okay. I don't know if maybe Shamika wants to think about this question as well. I'm not sure this is the right panel for that question, but if you want to answer, well, I'll take a couple more. Yes, at the back, yes. In the green shirt.
Hello, okay, yeah. With specific reference to the mitigation measures, keeping aside a point of costing environmental pollution which might be caused, considering that would be costing them which come in the future, does it throw the question of generational equality which we were just discussing about earlier out of the window? So we are not costing them who have caused the environmental problem maybe earlier, but we'll be costing them who will be coming out, making it more difficult for the people who are now poor to come out of poverty as such.
Okay. Does that mean you want to tax your parents more? Is that how you're looking at it?
No, I'm just saying that, hey, if you tax the next generation without having taxed them, there is no generation equity there. Are we okay with that? That's fine.
Interesting spin. I'll take one more question from this side. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my question is to the panel, but Ashwini ji in particular. We talked a lot about how policy sort of has a communication and a trust problem. So how do you deal with it other than, I know you said you visited many sites and there were conversations, but what can institutions do in general to build that trust in policymakers?
I think implementing agencies must come forward and share all the details in a very transparent way. Typically in a government setup or the way even the officers are groomed, we are not supposed to speak much in public at times, and most of the times our institutions are led by the political leaders who communicate with people. But I think now, especially when you are implementing the infrastructure projects, the implementing officers, the institution needs to have a proper policy to constantly communicate with people by all means which they have, because at times the traditional and conventional media may not, put across all the views, all the information, because they have a different purpose to serve. So, but they can use even the social media platforms. They should not hesitate to go in public, answer their questions, keep all the information in front of them, and then make people do that choice, which we did in Mumbai Metro Line 3. And that is how, even though we are passing through the most congested neighborhood of the city for past 5 to 7 years, and still we are getting the kind of citizen support, except maybe a few things that could be possible only because we had we were very outspoken and kept on informing people in a very transparent manner on what exactly is happening on the project.
On the one moment, on the question of generational equity, do you want to take that?
So I think from what I understood from what he said, the generational equity in terms of the climate change and the generational equity in terms of the people, say, from a poor cross section now coming in. What Shardul said, I would agree to that. The only point that I was also trying to make is, from a generational equity point of view, that cannot become the only overarching principle. There are other types of equity that we have to maintain: the rural-urban divide, the divide of people now entering the workforce, the people coming in now to the cities. So it does not mean that you throw that out of the window. As ma'am said, all the projects that are happening currently, we are starting to take care of the environment aspects, the other aspects. It's not that we are not taking care of it, but are we doing it in every single project? I am not very sure. PCMC, BMC, we have the finances good enough. BMC has finances which are quite good enough. PCMC is also decent financial health. But when we start to look at the whole of the urban India, do we have the capacities and the financial capacities in small municipal councils, small towns, for them to start factoring that cost in when they're trying to, plan their projects? If I don't have the money enough to make even a road in my new areas, how do I start planning for, other things? And then there is a whole debate of whether you want to make those new roads in those new areas, whether you want to keep developing, keep expanding or not. But I think generational equity cannot be the only overarching principle is what.
थैंक यू बन्नू जी, ये जो सवाल था ट्रस्ट के ऊपर, आपको कुछ बोलना है उसके बारे में?
अभी जो कुछ भी हम संसाधन का यूज़ कर रहे हैं, वो संसाधन इस तरीके से यूज़ हो रहा है, और बीच में जैसे कि चंद्रपुर ज़िले के मैं बता सकता हूँ कि सभी संसाधनों का यूज़ इस तरीके से हो रहा है कि आने वाले समय में जो भी कुछ भी वहाँ पे जो कन्फ्लिक्ट हो रहा है, पोल्यूशन बढ़ रहा है, तो आने वाले समय पे नए जो जनरेशन है उनके लिए तो कुछ बचेगा नहीं. आज ही इतना सारा प्रॉब्लम्स है, तो उसको लेकर ही हमारा कुछ पॉलिसी लेवल पे वर्क होना ज़रूरी है.
Yes.
So, hi everyone. I have a question for Ashwini ji. She's known as the Metro Lady in Mumbai. So, Ashwini ji, you know that Metro 3 car shade was a big issue in Mumbai. And other metro lines are also facing a similar issue in Mumbai, be it Metro 4, Metro 6 or Metro 7. So, but the issues of other metro car shades was not blown out of proportion as compared to Metro 3. So, do you think there is something related to the metro car shade location for RA?
I think she's answered that question already.
But it's related to the other metro car shades as well. So
yeah, okay.
Every locations would have different problems. The point which I was trying to make is, for any metro, a car shade is the soul of that project, because everything operates from there. And having that car shed in the proximity of the project or the terminal location is very, very important. In Metro 3 also, before the project, it was studied in detail, that multiple options were studied. There is a proper report which was submitted to the cabinet. So all other metro car sheds are also studied in the same way. So you can't put it out of context and say that we don't oppose the metro, but we don't want the car shed here. So I think we have to go rationally. We have to think rationally. Why only this was blown out of proportion? I can't make any comment on that. But I'm just simply making a statement that if we really want to make our cities grow, have a proper infrastructure and increase the livability of the city, we need these projects, and our approach to these projects should be sustainable. Where we are not following the environmental norms, yes, the authority should be grilled, but if it is done in a sustainable way, then you should approach it through evidence. And if enough evidence is there, then our stance vis-a-vis that project must be tamed accordingly.
We are ASES. ASES is a university student volunteer group. So ASES aim to export positive influence on humanity, offering the way to a safe, sustainable, inclusive, and religious world of happiness. So we are doing assets green carbon.
Is there a question there, ma'am?
Also, yeah, we have a question. So we came here as a representative of assets to implement the green carbon project in Pune, India. I wonder if there is a place where we need a green carbon project in Maharashtra as well as Pune.
Okay, if I understood this right, you're asking about having a green carbon project for Pune?
Yes.
Okay, I guess green carbon project, yes. Okay, but I'll collect one more question on this side. Yes, the gentleman on the side. I see you, but I'm trying to get some of the students. I know you have access to them afterwards.
Sorry, I'm not a student though.
No, I know,
My
but I also
question-
know he has access to all of them
Yeah.
afterwards.
So my questions to one of the point that Mr. Bandu mentioned is that there is a lot of conversation, but there is a lot of miscommunication which happens also to the political classes, right? So, and there is a lot of confusion which is also created when a lot of political classes get involved. So as a panel, to everybody involved who is part of the panel, what is being done to educate the political classes on these aspects?
Okay, that's a good question. I'll take one more. Yes, ma'am, right here in the middle.
I'll be very quick. I'm very keen to know what is the perspective of the panel on just energy transition. We've had a lot of discussion on marrying labor welfare with environmental development and sustainable development, and yet I've not heard too much about implementing or institutionalizing just energy transition perspectives, because that's a framework which is available and has been developed by the International Labour Organization and is being taken up by a lot of countries on how do we actually ensure that equitable distribution of the benefits of sustainable development are ensured while the transition is being undertaken. Thank you.
I'm not fully aware of, about what you're saying, but I kind of get the gist of it. My only answer to that would be, look, what's working for various countries, right, may not work for us. And Shamika ji spoke about how policy localization is extremely important. So from our perspective, we need to figure out what our version of energy transition is and how that's going to work for us as a nation and then for the world, right? So I'd look into what you're talking about, but I think if it's, in the same realm, that would be my answer to it. Broadly, right, there's a lot of things that are happening in the West that are looked at as frameworks, good learning points for us, but we need to figure out and make this our own and then solve for it, right?
So I think it'll be wrong to assume, Sagar, that the political class doesn't know what the importance lies. All the policies that come eventually through the will of the political class. Whether you look at the Forest Conservation Act dating back to 1980, or the fact that in the recent COP, India was one of the shining lights of people countries who've done really good on the entire sustainability scale. I'm quite sure that is coming with a good convergence of political and the bureaucratic class. So it will be too much to assume that they need to be totally educated. Everyone needs to update themselves, me, you, everyone sitting in the audience, as to what the new things are that are needed. And same holds true for any cross-section.
I have the same response, that political class is already far more educated than what we are. They know. The only thing is they would of course use it politically. I just want to answer one more question which the gentleman at the back was trying to ask, that metro corridor in the middle of the city has reduced the road width, but that is the purpose. That is the objective, that people should travel more by public transport so that we have less road width and more space available for footpaths, which will improve the walkability of the city.
Banduji, one last comment from you.
मराठीत बोलतो आता. सर्वात महत्त्वाचं अडचण माझं लँग्वेज बॅरियर होतं, पण एकंदरीत तुम्ही बघितलं असेल इथं काय पर्यावरणाच्या ज्या काही पर्यावरणाची चिंता करायला आपण इथं बसलेला आणि विकासाची गरज, ह्या दोन दृष्टीनं आपल्याला त्यातले आव्हानांची चर्चा करायची होती. परंतु दस्तरखुद्द आपल्याकडे आयरन लेडी अश्विनी मॅम असल्यामुळे संपूर्ण चर्चा मेट्रो वरती राहिलेली. तर विषय थोडा बाजूला गेला, परंतु मी त्या मित्रांनी प्रश्न केला त्याबद्दल बोलू इच्छितो. ॲक्च्युअल होतं काय की कुठल्याही प्रश्नाच्या संदर्भात कुठला तरी एन्व्हायरमेंटल ॲक्टिव्हिस्ट बोलतो किंवा एक समूह बोलतो, परंतु कधीही त्या परिसराच्या त्या आमदारांकडे किंवा खासदारांकडे जाऊन त्या विषयाच्या पर्यावरण विषयक जे काही समस्या त्याला भेडसावत आहे त्याला धरून ती संपूर्ण समुदाय जागृत नसतो आणि जागृत झालेला समुदाय त्यांच्या पुढे जाऊन कोणीच बोलत नाही. म्हणून कधीही संसदीय आयुध असणारे, जसं आपण तारांकित म्हणतो, लक्षवेधी म्हणतो, एलक्यू म्हणतो, हे नागरिकांचे ज्वलंत प्रश्नांचे मुद्द्यांचे प्रश्न होत नाही तोपर्यंत याला उत्तर मिळत नाही. आणि त्यासाठी सर्वस्वी आपणच जबाबदार आहोत. आणि आपण आमच्याकडे तर आम्ही हे प्रयत्न करतो की आपण नुसतं आंदोलन करत नाही, तर लोकांना चेतवण्याचा प्रयत्न करतो की तुमचं फक्त अधिकार नाही आणि तुमचे कर्तव्य सुद्धा जे घटनेनं आपल्याला घालून दिलेलं आहे. त्यामुळे पर्यावरणाप्रती सजग राहणं प्रत्येकांचीच गरज आहे. कारण की नुसतं कुठल्या ब्युरोक्रॅट्सला, शासनाला, सरकारला बोलून चालणार नाही. हे सर्वांचं सामुदायिकरित्या केले गेलेलं कार्य आहे, तेव्हाच आपण याच्यावर काहीतरी करू शकतो. धन्यवाद.
थँक्यू. Any last words from you?
Yeah. So look, I mean, this has been a great dialogue, right? And in as far as this conversation goes, we just need a lot more of this. My foundational premise and assumption in everything is that earnestly, politicians included, everyone is looking to do the right thing, right? And for us to get there, there needs to be dialogue, there needs to be reasoning, there needs to be conversations. So I'm really happy that Pune has gotten now this vehicle to do that yearly, and so I will, end my minute with that.
Yes, thank you. You made my job really easy in putting thanking our organizers. So thank you for that. Thank you to this excellent panel. I have to say I have been spoken at, moderated, many conferences for 10, 15 plus years now on subjects of water, climate, urbanization, foreign and security policy. But this is the first one of its kind that I've had the pleasure of being a part of. So I have to say, really amazing to the Pune Public Policy Festival for thinking of this kind of topic and putting it together. When Sahil first came to me and said, I'm doing this, do you have a topic in mind? I said, yes, let's do something about urbanization and environment. And he then came up with this broader idea. So thank you, Sahil. I know you're hiding somewhere, but thank you for putting all of this fantastic festival together. We'll move to the next panel. Please enjoy the next day and a half. And if you have further questions, please come and find our panelists, who will be around, I think, for some more time. Yes? And thank you, all of you, very much.